Good day. Welcome to a BW Businessworld Dialogue, a BW Wellbeing Dialogue. Uh, Well-being is about living, but the eternal truth of life is death. Today we are going to talk to Ms. Suzy Singh, who is a practitioner of healing, of compassion, of kindness, and she's written a book, What Death Teaches Us About Living, Loving and Letting Go. Today in the BW Business World Dialogue, we're going to talk to Suzy Singh about her latest book. Her first book, 7 Karma Codes, was also a bestseller, and she's translated it into other languages across the world. So in some way, this is her 5th book because the first book has got translated in other languages. Let me start by asking, why did you write this book, Suji? What death teaches us about living, loving, and letting go? Was there a need for such a book?
So this book was written, or at least it started taking shape in my consciousness during COVID. And 2 things prompted the writing of this book. The first one is my father's sudden demise, and it had nothing to do with COVID. But he passed very suddenly. He was in Mumbai, I was in Delhi, and we were in lockdown. And I could not give my father a farewell. You know, it's every child's sort of desire, a hidden desire, that when my parent passes, I want to be there for the final rites. There is something very sacred about death rituals because you want to let the soul of your parent pass very peacefully into the afterlife. And for me, what was most important was I wanted to touch his feet and take his last blessings. And that was not possible because of the lockdowns. The second thing was that when we got into the Delta phase, I found that all our Sikh brothers were standing outside Gurdwaras and they were providing free oxygen seva, oxygen langar. And I woke up one morning and I remember those scenes are so vivid in my mind when the internet was just filled with, mass funerals in the middle of the night, all these pyres burning. And the feeling in my heart was, if my Sikh brothers have so much courage, they are not scared of being infected, they are offering this seva, what are you doing, Suzy? That shriek came from my soul. And the very next morning I got up, I called, there is a NGO for mental health, which is set up by the students of IIT Mumbai. I am the advisor on board to them. So I called up the founder and I said, listen, we need to launch a new service and we need to launch it today, which is I need to set up a grief relief circle because like I am, I have struggled not to say bye to my father. I want nobody on this planet should be alone when their dear loved ones depart. And the community was not able to come together. There was no death rites, there were no rituals happening. So that is when I brought this community and this seva into the homes of people who were in lockdown, and I said, we are here for you and we will help you grieve and we will help you work through and process your grief.
So it was born out of personal experience and what the environment needed, so to say.
Yes.
And so you then set up this grieving circle, this community where you grieve together, you let your emotions out, and that's how it's led to the book, right?
Yes.
Your experiences, learnings, what works, what doesn't, is in this book. What that teaches us about living, loving, and letting go. Now, it's a lovely title. Let me start by asking you, talk about grief in the book. And the starting point is setting up that grief circle.
Yes.
And in the book, you talk about 2 kinds of grief. One is the expressed grief, the other is the hidden grief. How does one discover that somebody has hidden grief?
So, hidden grief, there are actually 3 approaches to dealing with grief across the world. And these are very heavily nuanced by cultures. One approach says that you should grieve openly, which is why in the earlier culture we had, even in India, we had the Rudalis, we had the weeping women, so that when they would weep, it would break open our hearts, and those who were very stoic or who were suppressed, they could express their grief. The second cultural nuances that it's okay to grieve for a short period of time, but then everybody in the family will start saying, be strong for your children, be strong for your mother,
Move on.
be strong, move on, it's time
Ab
to
ho
move
gaya.
on. हाँ, मतलब they give you a few days, which is usually they say, 14 दिन आपने अपने death rituals 13वीं हो गई, अब चलो now get back to the business of living. And there is a third one, which is that you just soldier through grief. You have to just suppress all your feelings, this is life, now just get on with it. So what the third and the second kind does is people just keep their tears freeze inside, and it builds a wall around their heart, and then over a period of time it starts creating disease in the body because they have not been able to work through their emotions. And that what is really I would say of concern is that what we don't process, we unknowingly transfer to the next generation.
Right.
So we find grief, which is related in the Chinese traditional medicine, it's related with your heart and lung. And that heart and lung disease, heart attacks, breast cancer, all of these things, we are perpetuating them to our children, grandchildren, and further on.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there is a psychosomatic response the body has to any feeling, and grief is a very strong feeling. Now, you said in the opening, you quoted a oracle, and you said the real purpose of a book is to be able to transform someone. The feelings in that book should get transmitted to the person who's reading it. What is the kind of feelings do you expect a reader of this book to have?
Well, I wanted this book to break open people's hearts because, as they say, you know, when the heart is broken open, only then the light can come in. So if your heart is tightly shut, you are not going to receive love, you're not going to receive faith, you will not receive blessings. And then we wonder, why do I feel nothing? Why does life seem so terrible? Why does it become a burden? And it becomes a burden because you've shut your heart away, you're scared to love again, you're scared to get attached. Life is about keeping your heart open even after terrible losses. It is a cycle of life. You know, we come, we live, and we will depart. But have we learned to do this, to love and to let go in the best possible way? That we will only learn once our heart is broken open. And that is exactly what I'm hoping this book will do.
Now, beautiful. 7 Karma Code is about living life well, kind of a toolkit to live well. This is a book to let go. You know, it's about how you tackle emotions which can be pent up and then lead to diseases or pass on to generations. Tell me, what is the advice you have for a person who's lost a loved one? How does one, he or she, really get to a point where the memories will always stay, but one is able to grieve and move beyond the initial days of despair and, you know, live on memories? So is there a process? Is there a, so to say, a toolkit to do that?
Yes, there are. I developed a process called the active grieving process, and I talk about it in the book. Now, what that involves really is, first you have to learn how to stay with uncomfortable emotions. That's the part nobody wants to do. They actually message themselves, which is really खुद का अपना एक तरह से बुद्धू बनाना कि
मैं ठीक हूँ,
I'm strong, I am. But what they're doing is they're running away from the uncomfortable feelings because it's so painful to sit and to stay with those uncomfortable feelings. But the first part is learning to stay with the discomfort and learning to let it in, allow it. You know, we are okay staying with comfortable feelings, but we are terrified of the physical sensation of our uncomfortable feelings. So staying with the feeling is the first part. The second part is all about forgiving yourself for all the guilt and the regret that you have. That will invariably follow the what if journey. मैंने ऐसे किया होता तो क्या होता? If I had done something differently, would it make sense? That's the second part. There is a third part, which is curating memories. And while a lot of people think about the good memories, they are not able to curate the difficult memories. Everybody has some kind of complaint, some kind of misgiving with the one who has departed. But once they've gone, we think, no, that doesn't matter. But the Garud Puran clearly indicates it's both the good memories and the bad memories. We have to detach from both these to ensure that the soul of the deceased moves on without attachment and continues its spiritual journey. So we have to do that process, and finally we have to learn to build a new normal for ourselves.
You know, in your opening, you have book divided into various parts. There is a section on don't cry.
Yes.
And especially when it comes to men, you know, crying is like, you know, you're weak. However, crying is cathartic. Crying is, you know, emotional relief. Crying is maybe getting you back to normal, right? So what do you have to say about crying, you know, when someone who's very close to you or part of your life goes away? Can crying help you release these emotions? Or it's a small part of the process?
That is such an important and marvelously stated aspect, Anurag, because crying is the most important thing. Otherwise, like I said, your tears are going to crystallize in the body. The problem is the conditioning. We have confused not crying with strength. And actually, it takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable and to cry. Now, when you cry the tears of grief, and we have Dr. Emoto, this gentleman who's done a lot of experiments, the water experiments, we know that different kind of fluids, water has different structures.
Right.
Grief tears, they have a completely different structure, and they have a painkiller in the tears. So when you cry, that is God's way of reducing the pain in your body. Crying is so important. It allows the pain in the heart to be expressed through the tears which flow out, and then it allows you to heal the loss, to let go of the person that you've loved.
Now, you also talk about in the book that, you know, there is a shuddering numbness when something like this happens. How does one deal with shuddering numbness? You know, is it okay to stay numb for a while?
So numbness will always accompany you, because that numbness arrives from the shattering of your identity. See, our identities are derived from the people, from relationships and the things we do. You know, who am I? I'm so-and-so's daughter, so-and-so's wife, so-and-so's mother, son, or I am, this is the business I do, or this is the work that I do.
Or this is my name, which again is derived from my parents.
Yes.
You know.
So now, the minute, let's say, my father dies or your mother dies, now who are you? And it dawns on us, I'm an orphan now. Who will I turn to? Who's going to fill that vacuum? Do I really belong here anymore? And then you go back into this whole idea of, I am what I am because my mother made me this. My thoughts, my ideas, my understanding of the world, my worldview, my filters about success, about failure, about friendships, about family, about being a good man or a good woman, all of these have come from my parents. When my parents are gone, who do I belong to? That deep pain needs to be answered. So first you go numb because it is too hard to bear the shattering.
And for some reason we believe that our parents will go on, or whenever it happens, you're never ready.
You're never ready. And I can say this from my personal experience, because I've been one of the people who actively discussed my parents' passing with them. I actively talked about, okay, when you pass, Mom, Dad, what would you like me to do? Do you have any last wishes to be fulfilled? What would you like me to do? Where would you like your ashes to be spread? And those are difficult conversations. Most people never want to talk about them, but I did. I mentally prepared myself for years. But when it happened, Anurag, all my preparation went to nothing. You realize you don't know death till you encounter it.
Absolutely. You know, I lost my uncle who was very close to me, my Mausaji, a couple of years back. And, you know, I felt the loss. But I lost my mother 4.5 months back, and then you really realize what it means to lose someone. When it happens to you, you cannot feel it in the same intensity earlier, whatever. I didn't feel it in the same intensity. Now, one of the things is one has regrets. How do you deal with regrets when death happens?
So that takes, the first thing you have to work through is all the feelings that come with the regret. You may be angry with yourself, you may be angry with the community, which is, it could be someone, they did not take them to the hospital in time, or you could be angry with the medical fraternity saying they gave the wrong kind of treatment. So, and finally, of course, there are people who are angry with God. I hear in my grief relief circles very often that we invested so much faith in God, we've been so good, we've been going to the Gurdwara or temple through our lives, we prayed so ardently for them to survive, why did He not listen to our wishes? So first we have to forgive the others. And then you'll find that the regret is, you'll blame yourself. I should have known. Like, it was so silly of me, but when my father passed and he was in Mumbai, it was COVID, lockdown, I was in Delhi, and I was thinking, I can't forgive myself because I was physically not holding his hand when the end arrived. No, it was impossible.
It happened in one night, so you couldn't have done it.
Yes.
It was not he wasn't ill or something.
Absolutely.
So you didn't, there was no.
So you have to then forgive yourself. You forgive the other, you forgive yourself, and then that leads you into a state of acceptance. It had to happen, it is what it is, and there's nothing that can change the eventuality. There is no, people ask me, is there justice when, little children die?
Yeah, I can't.
There's no justice.
When I start
it's your karma.
I can't fathom that. A friend's son passed away at 19. You also write about be with me now. My mother passed away, and people tell me in a good way, nice way, that your mother is still with you, she's watching over you, be with her now. And I'm not able to relate, I'm being honest. I think of my mother all the time, but early in the morning and late at night, I definitely, or sometimes like it's Holi tomorrow.
Yes.
And my mother was diabetic and she was not allowed to eat sweets. But on Holi, she would call me, ki mere liye gujia le aana. So, there are memories associated with festivals, with things. So, I'm not, they say, she's there. And you have a chapter called Be With Me Now. You talk of mythical messengers. You talk of spirit communication. Tell us a bit about that. I have not experienced it. Have you experienced it?
Yes, I have. I have, and some of those very powerful messages are in the book, and so they're very inspiring.
Give us one or two, just to give maybe one.
Okay, so I will talk about my own experience, where after my father passed, and because I've mentioned I could not meet him, so a few days after his passing, and I found that I was really blaming myself for not being there, I had this very, very vivid dream, and these are what I call the visitation dreams. I've talked about them in the book. They are a special kind of dreams where you can actually, it is actually like you can touch and feel the person in the dream. It's that real. It's not something that is imaginary. My father came to me. I was sitting at his Antim Ardas in the dream, and he comes to me and he's smiling, beaming away. And I asked him, I said, you can't be here, you were dead. And he said, no, beta, I've come to meet you. And I go up and I just go and I hug him because, with all the work that I do, I wanted to check that, can I feel his warm-bloodedness or is this just my imagination? I felt the warm-bloodedness of a physical body in my dream. And when I hugged him, it's like all the pain, the regret, the blame I had for myself just passed away. And I said to him, I need your last blessings. And he gave them to me. And it was such a huge completion for me at that point. Because I knew I had met my father. He knew this was really troubling me. I was not able to forgive myself. He came to me. I could hug him. I could touch his feet. I could receive his blessings.
He helped you complete. So, yes. Again, it's, I understand. You just talked about last wish. I couldn't have that conversation. In fact, I had no conversation. When I brought her to the hospital, she was okay. She was like fighting with the nurses, saying, "I'm okay. Why are you doing this to me? And this is hard." And then I had no conversation except with eyes. I remember she being, she had lots of wires going and, drip and that. And she was looking at me very angrily. "Ye kya kar raha hai, Anu?" My nickname is Anu. So I could feel that without her saying. And, me and my older sister met her and she was like, her eyes said it to me. But, she hasn't come in my dreams yet. I have not met her. I'm sure I'll meet her.
So that is a very important thing, Annurag, that one of the reasons, again discussed, how to connect with the deceased in the dreams is there in the book. And I mentioned people who are not receiving dreams, but they want to receive the dreams is because they haven't grieved. So have you blocked your grief? Have you stopped crying? Are you repressing your emotions? That could be one of the reasons.
No, I do from time to time, whenever, which is daily, I think of my mom. So I try and not think of her, I'm being honest. I try and not look at her photo because then, different kind of feelings engulf me. But I'm getting better. I seek her blessings in the morning. And,
So my suggestion is that people who have this kind of a problem, and I think it's very specific to men also because they've been told that they have to stay strong. I suggest grief on demand, which is set a time of the day, maybe 15 minutes, where you can actually see the photo albums, you can see the videos with your mother, where you can remember and you can allow your heart to open, give yourself permission to cry and be in that space.
Can I tell you, I still don't believe my mother is gone.
Yes.
It's so recent. I see her photos, Facebook throws up, or there is a festival that throws up. And, I'm not able to, I know she's gone. We performed her last rites. But I don't, somewhere there's like, the moment I do that,
That's a natural process because the brain is still looking the way it is wired. It has to create a new neural response. It is still expecting to see your mother around. And we find this very often in the language we use. You might be speaking of your mother to someone and you'll use the present tense.
Yeah, my first prayer in the morning every day, I used to say, and I still say that, and I correct myself, is, give long life to my parents. Yes. And these days I have to give long life to my father, and wherever my mother is, bless her. I'm sure you're blessing her. Now let's come to, you talk about hope. Can there be hope when there is, you talk about this community can be a alchemy towards compassion, alchemizing village of compassion. So how do you befriend grief and how do you move to hope?
So
how can there be hope in death?
There is hope in death because you need to now develop a transpersonal connection with that person. When we speak of God, a lot of people will see God in a murti, in an image, in a statue of God, right? But that is akar form of God. There are enough people who will transcend that and say, I can relate to God in a nirakar form, a formless state. So in life, we are connected with the one we love in a form. But now only the physical form of your mother has dropped. She still exists in some realm, in her nirakar form, at the level of the soul, and it is a soul we are communicating with. And when we start receiving these visitation dreams, these signs, you'll ask a question and suddenly the answer will pop from somewhere. And, birds and other creatures will appear bringing you message, inspiring you. You look into the eyes of that bird or feel their flutter and suddenly you'll feel, oh my God, I felt my mother just now. And you realize
maybe I will also feel that.
You will feel that. I mean, there is an example of a gentleman whose wife passed. Beautiful story of this gentleman, and he said, I wanted to go to Mecca after her death because I thought this was the best gift I could give her. And when he checks into the hotel, he miraculously finds that his booking is on his wife's phone number, and there was no way it was physically possible. And that was a sign to him. She came with him to Mecca.
Beautiful. I mean, faith can make these things happen. And you have many stories. You make your point through the people you've interacted and their stories, and stories of hope, stories of grieving, stories of holding back and then moving to grieving. You have a story of Sonia. Give a little glimpse into that story.
Sonia's story, every time that I read it, and I've written it, I've edited it 10 times over, every time I read it, it gives me the goosebumps. I think there is a Sonia in each one of us, because Sonia represents that raw, vulnerable self which we are running away from. She, in fact, represents the ability to rise beyond grief and all the hidden grief of even lived losses. We only talk about, when we talk of grief, we instantly think it's only about loss through death. But there is living losses. There are people who've got divorced. There are people who have not received love from their parents and they're still yearning and aching for that love from their parents. There are people who are out of jobs. They don't know how to, look after their families. There are people who hate themselves. And these lived losses, they also need some form of relief. They also need to be addressed. And Sonia represents everything. She stands for everything. I mean, when you read, and I would
So is it about being guilt-free? It's about forgiving yourself. You talk about letting go, but it's a bit about accepting yourself.
Absolutely. It is about learning to actually be okay with yourself. This idea that we are so accomplishment driven that we want to be the best versions of ourselves. We want to be perfectionists. We want to be on top of the charts everywhere. And in doing so, we deny our own internal goodness. I cannot tell you the number of people in my grief relief circles who I have to keep reassuring and say, repeat to yourself, मैं जैसी हूँ ठीक हूँ, या मैं जैसा हूँ ठीक हूँ. I am good as I am. Because everybody somewhere deep within believes, I'm not good enough. And that's the worst form of grief, because what that does is that allows, and that also I talk about in the Sufi faith, there is this whole idea of when you are vibrating at that low level of not loving yourself or actually hating yourself, and you have so much self-deprecation, you're inviting the shaitan in, because it's darkness. We have to be able to invite the light in. I am a creation of God. I'm not perfect. If I was perfect, I wouldn't be in my body, right? I've come into this realm of existence to purify my consciousness. I will make errors, but each day I am learning to purify my consciousness, to accept who I am, and to accept what God put me in this life to do.
In the book, you talk about how seeds of grief lead you to transformation. What kind of transformation are you talking of?
When somebody you love dies, a lot of people, they go through this phase of not wanting to live on. And this is very, very specific to, let's say, spouses. Yeah. Because where is the life after my spouse passes? And if they are elderly, that's even worse. In old age, when you lose the companionship of your spouse, that's horrible. In younger age, you wonder, who do I belong to? How do I go into the society now? How do I meet my friends? Everybody's lives are perfect. Mine is so imperfect. And so you need to be able to work through that aspect and find yourself again. Unless you find yourself, unless you are able to rise above this pain, you're not going to be able to create a new normal or a new oasis around which you will build your life. So this transition, which has three phases, first you've got to deal with the loss and end that, go through all of those difficult feelings. Then you have to go into this phase of not knowing, what am I going to do with my life now without this person? And then you go into creating a new life for yourself, new networks, new connections, new people to love, new friendships, maybe new work, maybe that is the sort of renewal and transformation we find in our circles, where people who were hopeless, they didn't want to live, now have renewed hope, They've found a cause to commit themselves to. They are inspired about making a difference to somebody else's life. They're inspired to embrace spirituality and purify their consciousness. Some of them are falling in love again and finding new partners. They're living on.
Beautiful. I think I'm going to read this book again, and I'm sure this book, when you read it, it will change your views on life, death, grieving, and on loss. So get this book. I hope you don't have to get this book, but
if it calls to them.
If it calls, and this is the eternal truth, death is. This is a book that will help you. It can become your companion. What that teaches about loving, living, and letting go. Suzy ji, thank you for writing this book.
Thank you
I'm
so
sure
much.
a lot of people who need the book will benefit from it. And you can always join her grief circles, and there are tools in the book about grief that you can refer to. In the end, you talk about this Japanese practice of repairing broken things and living on with them,
Yes.
and making them work, so to say. Talk a little bit about that.
One of the self-help techniques for grievers is the kintsugi inspired technique, which is where we find something that's broken or neglected or lying unused in the house. We give it 15 minutes every day. We transfer our consciousness, our brokenness, onto that object. And it's almost like we take our grief and put it into something else. We are giving it a personality through that broken object. And then we start to give it our love, our empathy, our care. And as we do that, we can bring that empathy, care, turn it inwards, bring it into our heart. So as we tend to that object, as we beautify that object, as we heal that object, we bring that healing into our own hearts.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Suzy ji, for writing this. And I'm sure this book will come in handy to those who may have lost a loved one or are dealing with grief of any. All the best.
I would just like to make one request to all listeners. If any one of you want to join our grief relief circles, this is a completely free service. It's a Seva initiative. It is our dedication to help people who are grieving across the world. Please just reach out to me. You can email me on suzyhealsme@gmail.com, or you can catch me on LinkedIn or any other social media platform on Suzy Heals or Suzy Singh, and just DM me. I will be most glad to invite your participation in our healing groups and support you in your healing journey through loss.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.